This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. I'm Evan Jansen. The show, of course, live. It's broadcast from our studios here in Auckland Park. Don't forget, we're also streaming live on YouTube right now with the entire show available on our YouTube channel. Today we start with the refugee crisis in Europe, with a crisis meeting scheduled for all nations in Brussels today. Germany closed its borders last night, saying it could no longer cope with the influx. We also look at refugees on the continent from Burundi who find themselves in camps in Tanzania. The alleged satanic game, Charlie Charlie, has taken schools here in South Africa by storm. Our question of the day: should schools ban the controversial Charlie Charlie game? That's our question of the day. We close the show with tonight's interesting climate change debate that will be held at the University of Johannesburg. But first, let's get the day's news from Anine Dilmal.
Good morning, I'm Anine Dilmal. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines today. Eskom has described reports that it had gone to extraordinary lengths to secure a 4 billion rand Gupta coal deal as unfounded. The reports suggest a mine in which the Gupta family has shares failed the coal quality test 4 times before landing the multi-billion rand deal. The Gupta's family's Oak Bay investment CEO, Nazim Hawa, has also described the reports as being factually bankrupt. The beatification of Benedict Daswa has been used as a platform to call for an end to the senseless killings linked to witch hunts. Yesterday, Daswa was officially named a blessed after the beatification service at his home village of Tsitanini in Limpopo. Daswa was killed for his Christian beliefs in February of 1990, at least. Meanwhile, the situation has returned to normal in Huwani in Limpopo. This following 2 weeks of violent protests in the area. Residents decided to suspend their action after Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa addressed them. The community wanted the Municipal Demarcation Board to reserve the decision, which could see Huwani merge with other areas like Malamulele. Mexico's president has urged Egypt to conduct an exhaustive investigation after at least 2 Mexican tourists have mistakenly been killed by Egyptian security forces. The tourists were killed during an operation against militants in the country's western desert. 10 others were also killed and another 10 were injured in the incident. In the United States, thousands of people have been forced to flee their homes in Northern California. Wildfires are burning out of control in the state. A state of emergency has been declared in the worst affected county, where hundreds of homes have been destroyed. Germany, Austria and the Czech Republic have tightened border controls ahead of an EU ministers' crisis refugee meeting today. Europe's most powerful nation has acknowledged it is struggling to cope with thousands of asylum seekers arriving every day. And in tennis, Novak Djokovic has claimed his 3rd Grand Slam title of 2015. The US Open final victory was also his 10th career major. He had a 6-4, 5-7, 6-4, 6-4 triumph over Roger Federer. Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just simply search for SABC Newsroom. Of course, you can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alina. As Europe's gravest refugee crisis since the Second World War continues to escalate, European Union ministers are set for a crisis meeting today. Ministries for Informal Justice and Home Affairs will get together in Brussels later to discuss the latest information on refugee flows and the situation on the ground. The meeting will take place with a backdrop of Germany's announcement yesterday that it was no longer able to cope with the influx of people and closed its borders last night. The EU unveiled plans last week to take 160,000 refugees from overstretched border states, as the United States said it would also accept some Syrian refugees. With Greece, Hungary and Italy struggling to cope, the European Commission chief Jean-Claude Juncker urged the continent to look to its history, ignore populist parties and take decisive action today. Now, to talk to us on this matter, we're joined via Skype by our very own European correspondent, Jack Parrock. Good morning to you, Jack.
Good morning to you.
Jack, is it fair to say that today is almost a make or break meeting for the European Union on the matter of refugees?
I think the Interior Ministers wouldn't want to call it a make or break meeting in case they don't manage to come to an agreement. But this refugee crisis in the European Union is building, and closing borders between European Union's Schengen zone country, the border-free zone within the European Union, is a very, very big deal. Now, the Germans insist that their border controls they're not about closing the borders, they're about controlling the flows, they're about knowing who is crossing the borders. And the meetings that are being held today, the ministers are holding them with the backdrop of closed European borders, which is very, very poignant and prominent here in the European Union.
Now, Jack, the plan that will be discussed today is how to evenly distribute refugees. Do you have any idea what that plan will entail? And then we've seen that it'll be very difficult to implement this. What's the implementation plan also?
So the idea is to spread 160,000 asylum seekers across the European Union member states, depending on their population, their GDP, and the amount of asylum seekers that they already hold. But it's a really controversial plan here in the European Union. The United Kingdom, Denmark and Ireland, they have the opportunity in their agreements as EU member states to opt out, and it looks like they will do so. Countries like Hungary and further over to the east, the Czech Republic and Slovakia apparently are not very keen on quotas because they say that it will only encourage more asylum seekers to come, with them thinking that they will get a place within a European Union country. But the countries that are front line of this crisis, Italy and Greece and Hungary itself, they have a lot of asylum seekers that they need to spread, that they can't control or contain or look after within their countries. So it's a plan that's going to be put forward, but last time it was mooted for 40,000 places. It was very difficult for the EU member states to get off the ground.
Jack, Germany's decision yesterday saying they can no longer control or the influx is kind of overwhelming, and they started to control their borders again. Has there been any reaction to it this morning from other countries?
The reaction is pretty much understanding, to be honest. The Germans saw 13,000 asylum seekers per day arriving into Munich at one point, which is incredible. And Germany's expecting 800,000 asylum requests this year alone, which is an astonishingly high number. So the Germans are now saying they've been incredibly welcoming of refugees throughout this crisis and so far, especially in the last few weeks. But they're now saying that they simply cannot control it, and they need to know, firstly, who's coming into their country, but also where to be putting these people and how to be spreading them across their country, and if the quota systems get implemented to other countries. So it's going to be a very, very tense set of meetings of the Interior and Home Affairs ministers here today, and they know that they're going to need to do something because this refugee crisis is not easing off.
Jack, the murmurs from the United Kingdom have been rather quiet or muted. Have we had any latest response from Britain with regards to their position on the escalating refugee crisis now?
The United Kingdom is indeed very reluctant to accept asylum seekers from the European Union and has been very, very against the quota system. Now, Britain has a particular set of agreements with the European Union. It's not in many of the, especially when it comes to border controls, not in many of the agreements. So it can opt out of these quota systems. But David Cameron in the past, the UK Prime Minister, has said that he will accept around 5,000 Syrian refugees coming from the refugee camps in Syria, so not ones that have arrived in the European Union already. But at the moment, we're waiting to see. Obviously, many of the asylum seekers look to go to countries like Britain, France and Germany with bigger economies where they think they will fare better in their new life and have a better chance of safety within the European Union.
Hungary especially, including other Eastern European nations, have already warned that they'll oppose any quotas, as it's called, on asylum seekers. Do you see this as the major stumbling block to today's discussions?
It will be the major stumbling block. Hungary's opposition is certainly very vehement and loud. They are very against the quota systems. But the Germans and the Austrians have implied that they may try and get the quota system pushed through even without a full consensus and only a majority consensus. So that might be an interesting twist today, because generally agreements of this nature need all a unanimous consensus. But with the crisis that's being faced here in the European Union, there's an idea that maybe they need to change that and get it pushed through even without the full majority.
And the situation on the ground, especially in the frontline states, can you give us a quick overview as to how things have changed over the last few days?
The European Union is in this refugee crisis, and what's happening is that people are very much struggling in Hungary. In detention centres, there's reports of some dreadful treatment and some dreadful conditions for the refugees. In Greece, where they're arriving on the islands and trying to make their way to Athens and then up to the borders with Macedonia, that journey is looking to be very difficult. Macedonia is becoming a real focal point of this crisis. There's allegedly some pretty serious human rights violations going on there, with the police and security forces beating the refugees. So it's a real serious problem. And those countries that aren't EU member states, like Macedonia and Serbia, the European Union knows that they need to work with them as well, because they have a major role. They're on the refugee corridor as well. So it's a very difficult situation here in the European Union at the moment.
And it'll be a very, very big day in Brussels today. Thank you very much for joining us today. Jack Perrock coming to you live from Brussels, where that crisis meeting will be taking place today. Of course, Germany announced yesterday that, well, they're going to introduce temporary controls now on their border, with especially Austria, to cope with the influx of refugees. This year, the country expects more than 800,000 refugees to arrive there. Meanwhile, an extraordinary meeting of the EU's Justice and Home Affairs Council has just started actually in Brussels, and more decisions will be made about the large numbers of refugees arriving on Europe's shores. Let's take a quick look at what your views are on the escalating crisis in Europe. Mary Kennison says, why isn't our ally Saudi Arabia taking in Syrian refugees? Asks Mary Kennison. That's a very good question. The Shady Duchess says, state of the national debate. Question, why is religion a factor in the acceptance of Syrian refugee? Answer, we've stopped the boats, says the Shady Duchess. Nucleus of Truth says, would love to hear from World War II, Vietnam, Gulf War I and II vets and current military personnel about their thoughts on Obama and Syrian refugees. Yeah, that would be very interesting now, wouldn't it? Lisa says, every day people around the world sharing life. I learned first about Syrian refugees by watching the group cross the border, says Lisa. Then Ronald Okoth said, I feel so sad and sorry for all these Syrian refugees and migrants. How worse can this humanitarian crisis get? We can only but pray for them, says Ronald. And there you have an iconic picture of the crisis. There's a young Syrian refugee with his bag packed, as it were, walking his way across Europe. Most of them are on their way to Germany, where they've been welcomed with open arms. In other countries, especially on the eastern side of Europe, as you've heard, the welcome has not been so friendly. The response has been somewhat violent, and there have been lots of human rights abuses. Let's take a quick look at the front pages from around the globe. Of course, we'll start in Europe, where the Times reports that Germany introduced those controls we spoke about on its frontier with Austria last night as the unprecedented influx of refugees. They continue to call it migrant, pushed European Union's passport-free travel zone to the brink of collapse. Then across the pond, we move to New York. The International New York Times says police and military forces mistakenly shot at a Mexican tourist convoy while pursuing militants in the country's western desert, killing at least 12 people. Then finally, down under Australia, the Daily Telegraph says Michael Ennis is free to play in the Sharks National Rugby League final showdown against the Cowboys, despite being charged with a Grade 1 careless high tackle. Of course, then you have at the bottom there, refugees still adrift, talking about the big numbers of refugees. Now, today's tweet of the day, well, this one comes from Molly Crabapple, saying, Syrian refugees aren't charity cases. They are people whose freedom of movement is being denied over a piece of paper. Very sober thought there. Thank you, Molly Crabapple. Very pertinent, to the point. The people want to go to Germany. Let them go through your country to Germany, is what she's saying in theory. Now, let's take a look at the picture of the day. This one comes from elsewhere in the world. Mercury captioned California wildfires. Devastation, as almost 200 homes have been burned to the ground in separate blazes all along the northern Californian coast as wildfires continue to burn out of control. What an iconic picture. That was somebody's lovely home that is now no more. Quick look at what's happening around the country in South Africa, in Johannesburg, where Nkululeko Habedi's estranged wife is expected to take to the stand as the trial of Sindisiwe Mangele, accused of killing Flabba Habedi, continues in the High Court. Then in Pretoria, a judicial inquest into the death of Annika Smith, the 17-year-old Pretoria schoolgirl whose hands were cut off in a 2010 murder, is set to begin in the Pretoria West Magistrates Court. The grade 11 pupil had been raped, their throat slit and the hands chopped off. Then, in the Western Cape, High Court judgment is expected in the Rocklands murder trial, where 3 men have been charged with the murder of 4 Pakistani nationals. That case continues there today. Now, the European Union is not the only region facing a refugee and migrant crisis. Africa is still searching for ways to cope with the millions of refugees displaced from conflicts across the continent. Earlier this year, the conflict in Burundi caused 70,000 people to flee into Tanzania. But behind the media's portrayal of a refugee crisis depicting basic living conditions, illness and food scarcity, aid workers spend long hours bringing order to the influx of needy people and assistance wherever needed. Now, joining us via Skype from Tanzania is the United Nations High Commission for Refugees representative and aid worker, Joyce Menz-Cole. Very good morning to you, Joyce. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning to you, and thank you for having me on your show.
I think there are many people who don't realize what an aid worker's job entails. Just give us an idea within the camps what your day looks like.
Oh, I wish it could be said that there's a typical day. But for myself as the representative, there's no typical day. If I'm in the camps, then of course I'm involved with my field staff. I'm involved in making decisions about a large range of issues, from water to food issues, along with World Food Program, to shelter, to protection, particularly of women and children. As the representative, I also have representation responsibilities, which means liaising with the government, regional authorities, local authorities in large measure. So it really depends on whether it is in an emergency situation or protracted situation. Yeah. And we have both here.
Just to give us a quick insight into conditions in the camp and the refugee situation we're having in Tanzania at the moment.
We had an influx from Burundi due to the conflict, as you probably know, that is continuing in that country. There is a level of instability, and there have been continued assassinations of a number of political figures. And early on, before the elections that were held, we had a mass influx. We have now just over 90,000 Burundians who have sought safety in Tanzania as a result of that conflict. The conditions are very, very difficult. Serious congestion as a result of the fact that Tanzania really only had one remaining camp. This is a result of actually the generosity of Tanzania having given citizenship to almost 200,000 former Burundian refugees in another part of Tanzania, as well as the generosity of the United States of America, which has offered to take 30,000 Congolese refugees. So had the influx not occurred, we would have been left with some 30 or 34,000 Tanzanians. As a result, we have over 157,000 in one camp. This is highly unusual for Tanzania because their preference is to have no more than 50 or 60,000. So we are very grateful to the government, which has agreed to give us 3 additional sites. And we are planning to relocate as urgently as we can by October 1st, at least 20,000 first, and then gradually to reach to at least 50,000 by the end of this year. But just one last thought. We hope everybody will send us good thoughts because the El Nino factor, or even just the regular rainy season, will pose a lot of challenges for us and all of our partners.
What's the most difficult aspects of working in these camps, and what are some of the most heartbreaking decisions that you've had to make?
I would say the most difficult at the moment is the congestion because of the lack of resources, and that does not mean that we have not received some resources, but really we are underfunded, and so therefore people really are not living in full dignity. We have protection issues. We have not been able to give people the amount of water that we should have. The standard is 20 liters a day. Because of the congestion and the difficulty in digging boreholes, we have sometimes not been able to give people more than 10 liters. We're working very hard on this issue to try to, in some places, parts of the camp, we have raised it to 14 liters, and elsewhere, we have done a bit better. But there are some who are still getting only 10 liters a day, which is insufficient for drinking, washing, and so we can see that there are some sanitation problems as well. I would say also that really, I'm not sure I've had to make a heartbreaking decision, but some of the decisions have been imposed upon me simply by the circumstances. I would want every woman, girl, man and boy to be safe in Nyarugusu camp. Unfortunately, we see that women and girls really have to still receive special protection to ensure that they are not victims of sexual and gender-based violence. And so we're working with a number of partners to try to ensure that. But I think that the heartbreaking part is that many of these refugees were here in Tanzania before, and about 35,000 returned to Burundi. But unfortunately, they could not find peace and safety in their country. And so we're seeing a sort of a cycle of pain and sorrow.
Thank you for joining us this morning. That's the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Representative and Aid Worker Joyce Mens-Cole, and she came to us via Skype from Tanzania. It's time for us to take a short break. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News. Welcome back. South African National Park, SANParks, in partnership with the private sector, has opened the 10th official South African National Parks Week. The objective is to promote access to natural beauty that South Africa has to offer. The week was officially opened this morning by the Minister of Environmental Affairs, Edna Malewa, and will end on Friday, the 18th of September. Under the established theme, Know Your National Parks, it will allow free access to the majority of national parks under SANParks management. Now, for a quick update, we are joined by our very own Leanne Manis from the official launch at the Marakele National Park in Tabazimbi. Very good morning to you, Leanne.
Eben, a very, very good morning to you. And that's exactly what it is this week. It's SANParks Week, as you mentioned. Free access to all South Africans that are holding a valid ID document. If you go down to any one of the 22 national parks, except for two. There are two national parks that are not included into that. And those are the boulders in Table Mountain National Park. And that's purely not to have too many people going to the penguins, because, as you know, that's a protected species and they don't want an influx there. And the other national park that's not free is the Namakwa National Park. So those are the only two parks. Otherwise, 20 of the national parks around the country are free, and you can go there and take advantage of getting in for free. The good news, Irban, is that some of the parks as well have extended it, not just from Friday, they've taken it to the weekend as well. So some of the parks, if you can ask them there, have decided, well, let's let some of our customers come in for free on the Friday, on the Saturday and the Sunday as well. So that's some good news. Well, let's, I suppose, talk a little bit more about SANParks. And as you say, it's now the 10th year that this has been part of South Africans' culture to come in the parks for free. But is it working? Are we getting more and more tourists coming in and enjoying our national parks? Well, somebody who can answer that question and many, many more is Fundisile Mkhitaryan, who is the CEO of SANParks. And also joining us on the program to talk more is the man who runs, the park manager of Marakele National Park. That is where we're broadcasting from this morning. And his name is Johan Talja. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Leanne.
All right, let's begin with SANParks now. This is a big week for SANParks. How successful has the campaign been?
Indeed, it is a big week. For the last 9 years, we have seen an increase in the numbers, especially people utilizing this week of September. Last year alone, we recorded 57,000 people using the opportunity. In total, over the last 10 years, we are currently standing at 178,000. Therefore, people are utilizing this. We have also added in the programs, taking the parks to the people, because you have those who are chronically ill. We also have programs for the elderly people, also with children with disabilities. Therefore, we are trying to add to make it more feasible for people to visit our parks, because our plan for this year is to double the number of last year.
Wow. So we've got to bash through that 100,000 mark this week.
Of course, we did.
All right. Well, let's see how it goes, and I hope so. I really do hope you achieve it. Johan, let's talk about Marakele National Park, because that's where the launch is taking place. And I imagine that this is going to do a lot for this particular national park that perhaps doesn't see as much attention as it deserves.
Yes, morning, Leanne, and morning to viewers. Marakele National Park, 70,000 hectares, situated in the Waterberg Mountains, just 2.5 hours from Gauteng, is a fantastic park, as you experienced. Development in the park at this stage is busy happening because our tourism product, because it's a young park, has not been that big. But we've got a lot of plans to extend on that. And yesterday, with the launch of South African National Parks Week, we actually also opened a new rest camp, 10 tented units at our Bontlek camp, which adds another 28 beds to the park. Now, apart from that, there are activities like guided outings and on foot or on vehicle with experienced guides to also make the experience for visitors to the park wonderful.
Yeah, and a truly wonderful experience it is, because, I mean, this park is a Big Five national park. It's got anything and everything you could wish to find, and right on your doorstep. I mean, because where we're broadcasting from is one of the watering holes, and I suppose once the hustle and bustle of the television cameras has gone away, this you're going to see full of animals coming in for their morning drink.
Yes, and maybe one can add to that it is also in malaria-free area.
Indeed.
So very close to Gauteng, Big Five area, fantastic bushveld area with plains and mountains, beautiful vistas, and all the game, of course.
Fantastic. Let's talk about some of the challenges that SANParks is faced with, and what jumps to mind is obviously what we're all focusing in on, and most people are talking about, is rhino poaching, which brings us to the conversation of wildlife protection. What is SANParks' stand on all of this? How do you deal with it?
We are currently experiencing a lot of poaching of our rhinos, but we know it's organized crime because other species they get stolen from our parks. In doing that, we had to develop what we call an integrated management strategy. The strategy was led by the Minister Molewa, a strategy that looks at 4 areas. One area is to grow the rhinos themselves. What we mean here is that in a park like this that has rhinos but has been no killings in the last 2 years, we need to take our rhinos from the hotspots like Kruger to the safer areas. That's strategy number 1. Yeah. Part of the strategy is the area of working with communities. We need to come up with alternative livelihoods for the neighboring communities, because it is clear even the people who get arrested are your local communities. Yeah. Therefore, they get infiltrated and recruited by syndicates. Therefore, we need to look at that area. The third one is to work with our neighboring countries. There are no South Africans consuming rhino horn. It was consumed elsewhere in the world. Yeah. Hence, with the Asian bloc, they've been signing off MOUs with them in order for them to assist with the demand reduction. Fourthly is the one of beyond borders crime networks. Yeah. We need to work on that. Indeed. This is a difficult area because you need Interpol, you need other enforcement agencies to do so. Because once a horn leaves our shores, what then you do? You will rely on those countries to assist with that. Therefore, we have this integrated approach that needs all our security clusters, that needs our communities. One point I want to make is that South Africans, I know, they are concerned about the onslaught in Kruger. Yeah. Kruger is big. Yeah. It's bigger than other countries. It's bordering 2 countries. We do have other small populations in parks like this where there are no killings because you can manage smaller populations. Yeah. Therefore, South Africans should not lose hope when they see the onslaught in Kruger. They must know you are in control of the situation. Like here, people of Waterberg, people of Tabazimbi, they are saying to the criminals, don't come here. Yeah. We know one day people around Kruger National Park, as big as it is, they will say the same. We are working with them because we are looking at alternative livelihoods. Hence, we have developed a concept of what we call economic hubs adjacent to our parks, because we want to achieve what we call land use compatibility. We want communities to avail their land for our business.
Indeed, indeed. Look, I think it's a great plan. It seems to be working here. I mean, the last time that you had a poaching was in October 2013. So I think to bring that in and bring the pride within the community is what counts. Gentlemen, I have to leave it there for this morning, but thank you very much. Good luck with the week. I hope it goes according to plan, which is a great success, and we double those numbers up. Over 100,000 tourists last year, Eben. 57,000 South Africans took advantage of this week. And you heard the challenge. challenge. We want to double that number. Well, that's what SANParks want to do. So hopefully they can with the help of some of this publicity that we're giving. So here was Fundisile Mkhitaryan, who is the CEO of SANParks, and of course Johan Taljaard, who is the park manager of this magnificent Marikele National Park. Evan, I urge you, come and visit here. It's only about a 2.5 drive from Johannesburg, so that's where we both stay. You better take advantage.
Thank you, Leanne. The pictures look absolutely amazing. I think I might take you up on that offer. Thank you, Leanne Manis, coming to you live from the Marikele National Park there. It looks absolutely beautiful. Now, before we continue, I have to advise parents that children under 16 should not really be watching the following segment. Just a disclaimer. Also, parents, of course, have been warned to look out for a demonic game which has been making the rounds like wildfire in schools across the country. The game is called Charlie Charlie. It's played with two pencils placed across each other on a piece of paper on which yes and no words are written. The spirit of Charlie is then called up and asked questions, and Charlie responds by moving the pencils. Earlier this year, a Durban teenager allegedly committed suicide due to his involvement in what they call these types of satanic rituals. The teenager was found hanging by a towel from the burglar bars in his bedroom. Principals from several primary schools and high schools have since banned the game, saying any pupil caught playing it will be expelled. Now, our question of the day, I don't know if you've seen it a little bit earlier, it asks of all of you, should schools ban the controversial Charlie Charlie game? Now, today here in studio, I'm joined by Reverend Martin Kla, who is the General Secretary of the Evangelical Alliance of South Africa. Very good morning to you, sir.
Good evening. Good morning, Evan. Thank you for inviting me.
I wanted to ask you our question of the day. Should schools ban this game completely from all schools in South Africa?
I wonder whether that wouldn't be a hard-handed way of responding. I think public education is probably the better way to go, because I think what young people are doing is simply to be very curious about these things, and I think unfortunately they get to dabble in the spiritual and the demonic, and that great harm will be caused. So I think public education and parental guidance would be useful. But I suppose from a legal, constitutional point of view, I don't know if it can be totally banned.
What about the game itself? It's been called satanic, demonic. What are your views as the Evangelical Alliance of South Africa with regards to this game?
I think the two things. The first is that the demonic and the spiritual is real. And I think, unfortunately, we live in a culture that is in denial in many ways with regard to the supernatural. I think this game does bring that to the fore, that there is the reality of the supernatural, the demonic exists. And secondly, I think if you want to see the true nature of something, I think you look at the fruits and the results. Mm-hmm. And quite clearly, if there are suicides and if there are all of these things happening, you're quite clearly looking at something that is very harmful to young people.
Indeed, it's very harmful. In some instance I've read, it says that, you know, you can only leave this game, exit this game by committing suicide. How do you view something like that?
That is typical satanic. I think the scriptures, at least in the Christian tradition, tell us that the agenda of the all is told of the demonic is to cause more harm, more death, more destruction. And so that's typical satanic, and I think as a nation we want to be aware of that and avoid it at all costs.
Now, scientists have come out in the last week or so, and they say that it is clear that it's not ghosts or ghouls or souls or demonic or satanic spirits that's active when these games are played. They say that it's gravity that makes the pencils move. What do you say? Well,
I'd rather say that it's both and rather than either or. I think that you can demonstrate scientifically that there is a specific angle at which you could put this thing and that you could balance the pens, but it doesn't answer. the spiritual dimension of it. It doesn't answer why people behave the way they do after they've played the game. It doesn't answer the death and destruction that follows. So I think science ought to be humbler in its claims than it is at the moment. I think there's a sense in which there is arrogance and self-reliance on their own wisdom.
What about the impact of a game as such on young, developing minds?
I think it is very harmful, and I think schools and parents and societies in general in society ought to be warning children that there is a harmful effect, that demons don't just have a touch-and-go relationship with whoever invokes them. They follow you up afterward. And so while it starts as a game, it can end up in tragic ways where the demons don't actually leave you.
And what would your advice be to parents when they suspect their children of being involved or having friends that are involved in this kind of activity?
Two things. I think the first one is simply for the children to avoid or stop playing that. But secondly, to the degree that there may be some demon influence that is already taking place, to really ask for help and get some help in terms of deliverance and exorcism. That might be what is necessary to do.
I thank you for joining us today, Reverend Moss Ntla, who's from the Evangelical Alliance of South Africa. Yes, you should take all these things seriously, says Reverend Moss. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, at least 107 people have been killed and 238 more have been injured when a construction crane fell onto the Holy Mosque in Makkah on Friday. Parts of the Grand Mosque remain closed off around the wreckage of that crane. Some of the views have been controversial. We've picked up quite a few on social media. Let's just take a look what's been going on with regards to this on social media. Hasham Umar says, saddened to learn about the deaths of pilgrims due to a crane collapse in Makkah. Condolences. Haider says, locate the mosque and Holy Kaaba. Pilgrims leaving the mosque are bombarded by advertisements from the facades of Makkah. There you have a picture of that crane that collapsed, killing 137 people. Now, after the deadly crane collapse in Mecca, some Muslims are asking big questions, says Aaron. And there you have the Muslim women programs pray at the Grand Mosque in the holy city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia. Pictures continue to come in. The impact of the Israeli attack on the Al-Aqsa Mosque yesterday. No respect for holy places. That's a different story altogether. I can tell you that deals with the fallout between Palestinian and Israeli forces during official prayers on a Sunday that was in Jerusalem and not related to what happened in Saudi Arabia. Now let's quickly take a look at what's happening on Newsroom Facebook page. Police Minister Nathi Nhleko says he's committed to putting an end to the spate of police killings. He was speaking at the opening of a new satellite police station in northern KwaZulu-Natal yesterday. Then police in southern Zimbabwe have arrested 3 South Africans who they say were trying to smuggle 29 sables across the border, and Malaysia has arrested 3 suspects in connection with the investigation into a bomb blast in central Bangkok last month that killed 20 people. That's our Newsroom Facebook page. Just put it, Newsroom, in the search bar. We'll pop up like our page, and you'll get all the stuff. Time to take a quick break. When we come back, we talk climate change as we wrap up the show.
We kick off this week's show by seeing how Kenyans are paying tribute to the victims, as well as not only how they've coped, but how they returned stronger after the attacks.
Last year, images of the 4-day Westgate Mall attack saturated front pages.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, artists have assembled to celebrate the peace this war-torn country has not had in a long time.
No conflict that can't be solved without a conversation. The Journal, every Saturday at 1:30 on SABC News.
Welcome back. Extreme changes in weather patterns, water scarcity and rising sea levels. These have been identified as only some of the believed human-induced factors that have led to global climate change. But the conversation on climate change, is it one that we have enough of here in South Africa? Tonight, the Department of Environmental Affairs, in collaboration with the University of Johannesburg's Energy Movement, who brought us the African Solar Drive, will host a debate on this very serious environmental challenge we all face. Now, to talk to us about this, we are joined in studio by UJ's Energy Movement Project Manager, Nikki Janse van Rensburg. A very good morning to you, Nikki. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Evan.
Are we taking climate change serious enough in South Africa?
I think we're all aware of it, and the debate has been continuously growing, and as the focus sort of shifts every time COPE happens, everybody starts talking about it again. We do see the impact in our water scarcities. It impacts our food security. So there's quite a bit that we need to do around that.
Just tell us quickly around that. What are the major impacts that we're seeing now? And what are going to be the major changes to our lives in the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years?
Climate change happens. It happened before humans started polluting the earth and everything else. So we have to be aware that the impact of climate change needs to be mitigated, and we need to do something about it. But the debate is really about what should we be doing. And even though we are having these conversations, I think we are not doing it in a critical manner. We need to base it on science and on facts, and not necessarily on belief.
And what about tonight? The collaboration with the university and the Department of Environmental Affairs. What are the kind of outcomes that we are hoping to achieve with tonight?
We're very happy and excited to have the Honourable Minister address the audience tonight to talk about what is happening in South Africa, how policy impacts our response to climate change. You know, ultimately it is how government sets policies for us to follow and to live by and to drive, and that will make an impact in South Africa.
Now, universities have become kind of a battleground for climate change, because I think young people understand it's their future. What are some of the solutions that young people are coming up with that are really impressing you, especially at the University of Johannesburg?
I think our students want to create new systems. They don't want to plug into existing systems. I think we all agree that there are some issues that needs to be changed and needs to address. And we want our young professionals leaving university to have a very serious awareness about the impact that our decisions have on the climate and on the environment around us. And universities creates a platform where we can actually talk to the community, work with the community and collaborate and take the research out into the community, make it common knowledge and make it popular so that people adopt the new solutions.
What about big business? You know, big business is such a critical stakeholder in the entire climate change debate. Are they engaged enough in this conversation? Are they even there tonight?
They are there tonight, and I think what big business is realizing is that there's actually quite a bit of opportunity in this as well. South Africa has a lot of renewable resources available to us, and in that lies the green economy. And if we start pursuing these opportunities, there's actually money to be made on this.
What about the rest of the continent, South Africa and then the rest of the continent? Is it something that we would be dealing with critically enough? We always see that Africa is worst affected by these things.
You know, it's always the vulnerable communities that are affected by this. As the climate change, it's food security, it's water security, and these communities need to be protected. And the choices that we make needs to not impact on them any further. So having policies that are protecting us and making sure that we don't allow big business and everybody to do as they please is really critical.
Before we wrap, just tell us quickly about your solar drive, solar-powered car. It went down so very well. Just give us a quick update.
So the African Solar Drive is pretty much an advocacy campaign where we build solar cars, and we have groups of professionals working, young students working on these cars, building them, and then going up into the region. So they went up to Namibia and Botswana to talk about renewable energy solutions and what is available for us to use. You know, in Germany they have half the sun, but they're powering 60% of their power off of renewable energy. We have twice the amount of resources in South Africa. We should be doing the same.
we should be doing the same, but common sense is not always so common. Nikki, thank you for joining us. Nikki Jansen van Rensburg. There's a very interesting climate change debate. It's happening tonight at the University of Johannesburg. It involves the Department of Environmental Affairs. Keep your eye on that. The outcomes will be very interesting. We'll certainly look at what comes out of it. Nikki, thanks for joining us. She's the University of Johannesburg Energy Movement Project Manager, and she joins us this morning. She'll also be at the debate tonight. That's where we wrap proceedings today. Newsroom, of course, broadcast live from our studios here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. Don't forget, we're also live on YouTube at that time, with the whole show available on demand on our YouTube channel. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.